Hey, hey.
Welcome.
Am I getting some weird feedback? Oh, I'm okay. Hey, guys, welcome, everybody. Happy Tuesday. We are going to have a good time tonight. We've got some fun in store for all of you guys. We have a special guest tonight. This is our In the Spotlight with Battlefield Addiction, and our special guest is Sam Quinones, the author of Dreamland. And I'm going to have Jeff, our host, introduce him in just a few minutes. I'm going to take care of a couple things first and make sure that we're all set up to go. So they're going to just hang tight here for just a few minutes. So first of all, if you're new tonight, let me give you a couple tips on the whole Zoom. First of all, everybody's muted. Everybody starts out that way. We'll give direction on how to unmute yourself when it comes time for Q&A and all that good stuff. And there is a feature on your Zoom device. Depending on what device you have, you do have the option to view in speaker view versus gallery view. So just a little tip that might be helpful for you. It's helpful to watch in speaker view, so you just see the speaker versus all the different screens. That can be distracting, and if your device is really small, it's hard to see. So we want everybody to be able to see the speaker. I'll be handling the spotlights and things like that to keep the speaker on spotlight and whatnot. But if you change your feature to speaker view, that will be helpful. And a couple announcements first. Now, okay, we do have Kyle's Comedy Corner. Oh, first of all, let's tell you about our Battlefield Moms group. So Battlefield Moms groups every Wednesday, 11 o'clock. All of us moms get together on Zoom and we have coffee together. And this is just an opportunity. It's 1 hour every Wednesday morning. This is just an opportunity for us moms to all connect. We talk about the topic from the night before. So tomorrow will be extra fun. So we can talk about our special guest tomorrow and just share really what our biggest takeaways were. When we have questions or we're maybe confused and we have something carrying over, we all get to just kind of discuss it and talk about it. And it really helps to actually help integrate what we're learning here each week. So it's awesome. So please join us. You can join every week or just come when you can. I know some of you work and can't make it, but if you have a day off, if you arrange your lunch break, you're welcome to come, even if you just pop in here and there. Once you have the link, the Zoom link, you'll always have it. So just reach out to me or Kristen to get the Zoom link and we'll get you connected. So that's Mom's group. And so next, we've got Kyle's Comedy Corner for you tonight. So is Kyle ready? Is he at the Basement Crew or is he at
Kyle
home?
Is ready. No,
oh, great. Hey, there's Kyle. Let me put you on spotlight, Kyle. So that will be a little helpful. All right, go ahead, Kyle.
Okay, so most, if not all of you know that I have developed this very serious fear of speed bumps. And yes, I'm slowly getting over it. But I've also developed this serious fear of elevators. But I'm taking steps to avoid them. I was told, they said that a mask was all that was required, for you to get to Safeway nowadays. I mean, they lied. You also need pants. Usually I go throughout my day and I tuck my knees to my chest and then I lean forward. It's just how I roll. What is the most terrifying word in nuclear physics? Oops. What did Blackbeard say when he turned 80? Hey, matey!
Matey.
Jokes right now. I gotta make something to eat.
What does an apple and an orange have in common? They both don't drive.
What?
Where do you take a drug addict bird? Tweetment. Last one. Where do kings keep their armies and their sleeveys? Okay.
Oh, very good. Thank you, Kyle. I should have given that some context too, because we do have some new people on tonight. So Kyle is a manager at Rebuild Recovery, and he has our comedy moment every week. But yeah, so that was Kyle. Thank you so much, Kyle. Thank you. All right. Oh, go ahead.
Can we get a sound check over here? How are we?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay. And can you, there's a bunch of people, it sounds like, that aren't muted from our perspective. So.
Yeah, I think I got them all. Oops. I just muted you. Let's unmute Travis. Let's get you guys unmuted again. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Yeah, we've just got Jeff unmuted. Yeah. So yeah, I got him. I just got him a little late. So I think we're good. We're going to keep everybody muted. We're going to, Art, did you have anything else to say before I introduce our host?
I want to make sure that Sam and kind of anyone that's new kind of understands what goes on here every Tuesday. Normally every Tuesday we do what we call solution group. And what that means to us is that we focus solely on the solution to what's happened in our country and what's happened with the youth in the opioid epidemic, and what's been going on with the disconnect in families and communities. And we feel that we spend entirely, and we set out every week to spend entirely all of our time focused on the solution. Very rarely do we spend time talking about the issue or talking about the problem. And tonight is kind of a look into how a lot of our communities got where they got. And before I let Jeff introduce Sam, I just want to say that I spent a lot of time listening to Sam on YouTube or whatever when he told the story of Dreamland, and I found it phenomenal. And I remember listening to the book and doing all of it or going over it. And what I found was that Sam's take on it was generally the cleanest perspective that I'd seen. It was neutrality at its best. It was somebody that wasn't trying to be a hero to the problem or wasn't trying to solve it, just kind of laying out what happened factually. And I thought it was beautiful. And I really love his take on what's happened in pain in our country and how we handle pain and how we're prescribing to handle pain. So I just wanted to kind of state the context of what goes on here. Normally every Tuesday night is I do a talk and we talk about a topic about getting better and about connecting more and about how we solve this problem in our community. And I just wanted to give Sam a glimpse into this community that when we do talk about it, we have a good time, and it's not some doom and gloom. And it's actually a perspective of excitement about what we're willing to learn because of this problem. So that's what I wanted to set the context for first. And then we can go on to Jeff and his introduction, and we're going to have a talk tonight with Sam.
Great. Perfect. And I just want to take a moment to really acknowledge and introduce our host, Jeff Costello. Jeff has been a friend of ours for many years. He's been a huge supporter of Battlefield before Battlefield was even a thing. He supported us. He is a very successful real estate agent up here in the Northwest with Tribeca and Northwest Real Living. And Jeff is our host. He's just been doing such a great job. He's been such a value to our organization and in the spotlights that we just started in December. And so he's got, I believe it's 13, 14 years in recovery himself. Really, we appreciate Mr. Jeff Costello. So let's get you in the spotlight, Jeff. My screens are a little bit weird tonight, so they keep bouncing back and forth. There you are. I'm going to spotlight you. They keep bouncing back and forth, so I keep losing people. But I'm going to let you take it away, Jeff.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I get confused sometimes of how long I've been sober and how long I've been married. So it's either 14 or 20. So thank you for that. Good evening and welcome back to our fourth edition of In the Spotlight with Battlefield Addiction. I'm your host. As Andy said, my name is Jeff Costello with Tribeca Northwest Real Living, and I'm in the business of helping and serving our friends, our clients, to buy and sell and talk real estate. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity, and I absolutely love being a part of Battlefield Addiction and Art Dolan's message and vision of in the world of recovery. So I'm so excited tonight. I mean, I say that every time, but I'm super excited about this talk because the message is different from what we've already heard. You know, I've been reading his most recent book, Dreamland, A True Tale of American Opiate Epidemic. And I'm not finished with this book, but it's so good. It's honest, and it tells a story of what is really happening and how it happened so quickly. I believe what he has to share this evening is something different from the perspective of the outside looking in. Dreamland is going to make you really take a look at what's going on in the world and our country, and it will trigger emotions. It definitely did that for me. So our guest tonight is journalist Sam Quinones. I hope I pronounced that right, Sam. Sam's is a storyteller, a former LA Times reporter, and author of 3 acclaimed books of a narrative nonfiction, including Dreamland. Sam's career as a journalist has spanned almost 30 years. He lived 10 years as a freelance writer in Mexico, where he wrote his first 2 books. In 2004, he returned back to the United States to work for the LA Times, covering stories in immigration, drug trafficking, neighborhood stories, and gangs. In 2014, he resigned from the LA Times to return to freelance working for the National Geographic, Pacific Standard Magazine, the New York Times, LA Magazine, just to name a few. So tonight we're going to do it a little differently than we have before. Sam is not going to share his story or give a speech or talk about his struggles with addiction, because Sam is not an addict. Sam is a journalist. So we welcome Sam Quinones. I hope I pronounced that right. I'm so sorry if I didn't. And tonight we're going to have a conversation. You know, it's going to be a Q&A. But first, I do want Sam to share the story of Dreamland, because I read half the book, so I haven't got through all of it. And I was like just mesmerized. So I really want to hear, you know, a snapshot of the book. And then really, I want to learn a little bit more about what was your inspiration of writing this kind of book. So without any further ado, Sam?
Yeah, Jeff, thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Thanks to you, Angie. Thanks, Art. Love the music you guys were playing at the beginning of this thing. Really a great way to start something like this. And so thank you all for just tuning in. Yeah, I've never been addicted to anything but nicotine, which actually is a pretty serious addiction if you go back. But my interest in all this is as a journalist. You know, when I lived in Mexico, this really starts with my experience in Mexico. I was down there for 10 years. I didn't really cover drug trafficking when I was down there. First of all, because I was a freelancer, I had nobody backing me up. I had no big corporation with lawyers and budgets and all that. I was a freelancer. I was independent, you know, very punk rock kind of thing, man. And so I just said, drug trafficking is for other people to cover. I'm going to cover immigration. And so I did that for a long time, wrote 2 books. I came back to the LA, worked for the LA Times, and at the LA Times at that point, the drug war, while I was out there, the drug war was kicking off down in Mexico. And by that, I mean the war between cartels over territory in Mexico, over drug trafficking routes. And then in comes the government in the form of the military, various elements of the military and so on. And it got and has remained very, very savage, as we've all read, I suspect. That's really where I got up to speed on drug trafficking per se. I knew a lot of the history of it, just wasn't aware. Hadn't written so much about it. And while I was at the LA Times, they put me on a team of reporters to cover that drug war down in Mexico. My job, actually, I spoke fluent Spanish, and I lived in LA. So my job was to cover how drugs go across the United States once they've crossed the border. And it was a real it remains fascinating endeavor, and I'm still involved in that kind of reporting. Along the way, I had been a crime reporter earlier in my career, and I can still consider myself basically a crime reporter. I love it. It's really one of the most interesting jobs in journalism, I think. And so as I was getting into this, I realized, as I was on this team at the LA Times, I began to realize that for some reason, Mexican heroin traffickers were all of a sudden doing banner business. And this made no sense to me whatsoever. First of all, a few things didn't make any sense. One was that there would be an increase in heroin demand at all. I mean, I thought the heroin thing was like the 1970s, it was over, it was French Connection and all that kind of stuff. Who really cares about heroin, And all of a sudden, seizures were going up, more people getting addicted, et cetera. So it was clearly becoming a problem, little by little, very quietly, but clearly a problem, I could tell. And as part of that, I found the story that I wrote about in the book of this one small town in a small state of Mexico called Nayarit. Nayarit's right next to Sinaloa, the big drug trafficking center. And people from this town had this system for selling black tar heroin like pizza, basically. And so you'd call in an order, and they would come deliver it to you. No more motels or cantinas or housing projects or anything like that. Excuse me. This was a common kind of thing in LA, turns out, but their difference was that they had taken it nationwide. They had used this system to chart out markets all across Western United States, and then hopped the Mississippi River, and we're now, by that time, we're in a number of markets in the Midwest and on the East Coast. And I was just blown away by this. I just couldn't believe. I was just so fascinated. Huge amounts of heroin coming in through this one little system that these folks from this one small rural county in this small state of Nayarit. And it's very much like pizza delivery. You would call up an operator in whatever city, Cincinnati, say, or Charlotte or Reno or whatever, and they would send a guy to go deliver you your heroin. And it was very low key, very low profile. Nobody wanted. But what struck me along the way was that these guys' market was expanding, and so I could not understand that. And I got into the story, and I was writing a lot about this town. I went down to the town. I interviewed a lot of guys who were in prison, caught up in this, who are from that town. And then along the way, I began to realize that there was a much, much bigger story at play. And that was the revolution in pain management that had taken place in the United States while I was in Mexico. That's why I knew nothing about, I didn't really know what a Vicodin was or what an OxyContin was. I didn't have no clue about that stuff because I was in Mexico, and if it didn't have something to do with Mexico, I didn't care about it. I was just totally focused down there. And so I come back, and all of a sudden I realized that the much, much, much bigger story, I almost focused on a small symptom almost of the story. A much bigger story was how in the 90s and into the 2000s, pharmaceutical companies and pain specialists had put on a kind of a full court press to convince doctors and hospitals and the VA, et cetera, that pain could now be eradicated, number one, that we had the tools to do that, number two, that these tools, but we weren't using these tools because we were unnecessarily afraid of their addictive capacity, and these tools were opioid painkillers, narcotic painkillers, Vicodin, Lortab, morphine, the brand names, of course, and then of course, OxyContin came out in 96. And their idea was these pills, and what they promoted and what they sold very, very aggressively, and part of my book is about that as well, how they sold this idea as virtually non-addictive. You can prescribe narcotic painkillers derived eventually from the opium poppy to people who are in pain or have chronic pain of some kind after surgery or whatever, and they will not get addicted. And it doesn't matter how much you give them, they won't get addicted. And so what began to take place in the mid-90s really was this escalation of supply all across the country. You began to find people, doctors buying into this. It was now like their job. It was their mission. You could get dinged if you weren't prescribing these pills. You could get your compensation dinged. You could lose your hospital privileges. All the hospitals could lose accreditation. So there was all these incentives and pressures on doctors to prescribe these things, and they began to do so. And so the prescribing begins to take off and just goes and goes and goes every year, more and more. And every year this is happening all across the country, from Maine to Arizona, Oregon to Florida. This is going on pretty much all across the country for a good 15 plus years. The problem is that they didn't understand, they didn't take into account a historic change which had already taken place by the time this was going on. And that was the historic change in our heroin markets. Now, for many years, I'm 62. When I was growing up, what I knew about heroin, I learned from those great movies out of New York City, right? French Connection, Serpico, Prince of the Cities. Watch those movies, and it tells you the story of heroin up until the 1980s, basically. And certainly, and the reason it's all about New York City is because a lot of that heroin comes from the East Coast, from the East, from Turkey, from Burma, Thailand, etc. And it comes through New York City, and then from there it goes to a lot of the other places. Now, Mexico had a certain element of of heroin trafficking during those years, but it wasn't anything like what it is today. And what took place was the heroin that was coming in from the East, because it had so far to come, because it had to cross continents and an ocean to get to even New York City, then go to Cleveland, then go to other parts of the country. It got here very, very weak, stepped on repeatedly, and very, very expensive. And so it was a very poor product. And what began to happen in the 1980s, along with the cocaine that began coming in from Latin America, was heroin begins coming in from there too. For Colombia, the Colombian cartels are also moving in heroin from along with their cocaine. And the Mexicans are getting there too. They're not there yet, but they're on their way. And so increasingly, what you begin to see is there's a huge replacement. That heroin outcompetes the heroin from the Far East, right? It just gets here much more potent and much cheaper every year, lower in price every year, more potent. And by the time the opioid revolution in pain management comes around, we're not getting almost any of our heroin from the Far East anymore. It's almost entirely from Latin America, and increasingly, of course, today it's virtually all of it from Mexico. And what that means is that people who then were fully dependent and then addicted to opioid painkillers, once they couldn't get those pills, they get cut off from their doctor. Maybe they lose their insurance, they lose their job, then they lose their insurance. A lot of things could have happened, but whatever the case, people begin to lose their access to prescription pills. But the supply is so big of pills all across the country that there's these new black markets in these pills all across the country as well. So these pills are selling for $1 a milligram. Well, if you're using 150, 200 milligrams a day of oxycodone or hydrocodone, or one of the basic opioid painkillers in these pills, that's not sustainable. So that people begin to look around for a cheaper alternative that is just as potent, and they find it in this heroin that is coming up now from Latin America, no longer from Burma, no longer from Turkey, coming up very cheap and very potent, equally, if not more so, more potent. Most of the time it's more potent, lasts longer than the pills that they can get on the street. And so that was the story that I set out to tell. It's like twin tales of drug marketing, right? The guys from Nayarit, this little town, and their way of hustling dope, and the pharmaceutical companies and their way of hustling dope. But as time went on, and I'll just talk very briefly about this because I want to get to questions and all. What I began to also realize, and I did not start this book this way, I really had this very little limited idea of what the book was going to be about. Drug trafficking, pharmaceutical marketing, that was the story, right? And that is part of the story. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But as I got into it, I began to realize that this story was much, much bigger than just that, okay? It was really, I began to understand that this was a story more deeply about what we had become as Americans and what the country had become, how thoroughly we had dissolved or destroyed the community bonds that held us together, how completely we were now isolated one from each other. You know, I began to see real connections to this story in these barren streets, these neighborhoods, middle-class neighborhoods. You go around, there's nobody in the streets. When I was a kid, growing up in Southern California, I was never inside. I mean, never. You know, I come home from school, I'd be outside. There'd be clumps of kids all up and down my street playing outside together, hanging out together, riding bikes, playing football, playing basketball. The park, 2 blocks from my house, packed constantly. The same place, I go back to that same place where I grew up, not far from where I live in LA. It's about 50 miles away. And whenever I'm out that way, I swing through the old streets and they're all barren, you know. And so as I got into this, I began to understand that there were these other themes, very big, that when you get into it, it's always about the theme of isolation versus community. Right. This is the fun. It's not about economic. I was told it's all about the devastated economic communities of Appalachia and the Rust Belt. Yeah, it's true but this is a problem in some of our better off suburbs all across the country. This is not about only about economics. This is about how we have destroyed the bonds, the community girdings, the things places where we used to come together. That's why the swimming pool Dreamland is a swimming pool that was destroyed, dug up in this one town in Ohio. And that was where everybody saw each other. Everybody came out, you know, and then it was kind of dug up and basically left the town very, very vulnerable. And that's what I felt we did. We had destroyed community to such a degree that all across the country, again, in wealthy areas, in middle class, in poor areas, all across the country, we had destroyed community or ignored or defunded or whatever. Community, the things that brought us together, that we were like vulnerable, we were all vulnerable. We're all like wide open to this new plague that came in. And it was also about how we as Americans, you know, getting back to what we had become as Americans, we had become almost scared of pain. Now, no, pain can be life mangling. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And I'm not trying to make light of people who have, you know, arthritis and kinds of pain that are truly destroy your lives. And those people need to be treated, I think, sometimes with opioids, and they need to be understood to have this stuff, because that kind of pain is not a joking matter. But I think all across the country, a lot of Americans began to push back when doctors say, no, you need to take accountability for your own wellness. You don't need these pills. You need to work out. You need to stop drinking liter bottles of Pepsi. You need to stop going to fast food. You need to walk more, swim more, drink more water. Doctors would hear back from their patients, no, doc, you fix me. You fix me, doc. And the fixing, they don't have a way to fix us. You know, we really don't. So the best they could do is give us opioids, and that's what happened. And so all across the country, this was a story on the one level too, that's, you know, the agony you create in the search for a pain-free life. That's also kind of part of this story. So anyway, I'm happy to talk more about this. I want to leave wide open for questions and comments and so on, or whatever people have and what Art has, whatever. But that's kind of the basis for the book that I wrote. Came out in 2015, And I've got another one coming out in October that's kind of a follow-up to that we can also talk about. But that's how I came to write this book, not really having any knowledge of what a Vicodin was, what an OxyContin was, never knowing anything about addiction or pain management or any of that kind of stuff. That was my focus. My focus was, as I said, on this other story, and it just became much bigger.
All right. So tell me a little bit about so what was the inspiration? Did it just kind of happen that you just,
No.
started following?
Look, I began to realize, as I saw that this story was coast to coast, as I saw people all across, I realized it was like it hit the journalistic DNA or something in me. And it hit me at the gut like, this is a huge story. This is not only coast to coast, it involves Mexico too. It involves pharmacy. And so when I was in the middle of understanding that, I remember this one moment where I sit back and as a reporter, I go, holy shit. And when you have that kind of moment as a reporter, you better act on it. You know what I mean? You better follow it, because if it's that big a story and no one else is telling it and you don't tell it, you got to find another job. Seriously. It's not, you're not fit for the job. And there's nothing wrong not being fit for the job. But I thought to myself, this is huge. I thought it was just like this heroin story, this small thing, you know what I mean? And then I began to realize, no, it's everywhere. And what's more, there's potential millions of heroin addicts all across the country now. It's not just San Antonio and LA and Chicago and New York City and Baltimore. It's Idaho, it's Bend, Oregon. It's small towns in rural Kentucky. I mean, it's everywhere. And I remember feeling that, going like, this is the biggest story I've ever encountered in my career. Well, there's been a couple others, but pretty much one of the biggest. And I thought to myself, this is just so, and so I was not motivated. I don't have addiction in my background or in my family, and so that was not my motivation. And I think that's probably a good thing, because when you have that in the background, it's always there as a potential. And my feeling was, I'm here to do my journalistic kind of duty, which is I found this huge story that nobody's told in full, and therefore I need to tell it. And that, I remember that feeling very, very strongly. What inspired me was the idea that I was onto something nobody else was. And if I didn't tell it, but here's the thing. I wrote this book proposal. I had a very good agent. She helped me write this book proposal. We took it around. This was 2012. Okay. We took that book proposal around, or she did, in New York City, to must have been a dozen publishing houses, right? All the ones you've heard of, Big Macmillan, all this stuff, and Random House, etc. And they all said no, right? One publisher out of a dozen or 15 or whatever, I can't remember how many, but she sent it to several, said yes, gave me a small, an advance. It was very generous. It wasn't very large in advance terms to pay for my expenses and so on, but it was what it was. And I leapt at it. Now, see, that's the difference. Nowadays, you would have all the publishing world in New York just lining up down the street for these kinds of book proposals. But at the time, I never forget it, thinking like, what am I doing? Nobody thinks this is a story. My own in-laws in Indiana, they're younger than I. They're wives of my wife's brothers, and they're younger by about 10, 12, 15 years, maybe something like that. And they're going, what are you doing? Why are you writing this book? This was the end of 2012, early 13, as I was just beginning. What are you writing about this for? This is, and when I'm at, what is heroin? She didn't really know what it was. And now what happened was, after the book comes out, they have a whole Facebook page of heroin addiction in their county, so it was like this conspiracy of silence all across the country. Nobody wanted to, that's what I encountered, okay? I encountered all across the country, nobody wanted to talk about it. It was like the early days of the AIDS epidemic. Everybody wanted to say, no, he died of cancer. He died of, so they make up these obituaries and so on. And that's kind of, but the inspiration was that this was a huge story. I knew it in my gut. And it took a while for my gut to be proven right, but eventually it was.
So was there anybody of significance that followed up, maybe from the medical community or law enforcement, that wanted to know more from you as the author?
Well, since then, what's happened, yeah, I mean, what happened was I wrote this story about the guys from the state of Nayarit, and I published it first in a series of stories in the Los Angeles Times. It was only about them, nothing about OxyContin, about pharmaceutical, nothing about that. And the places where these guys were operating, there was usually one cop, maybe one prosecutor, who were very tuned into what these guys were up to and how they operated. And there was a guy in Denver, Charlotte, and usually it's just one cop per metro area. I found one guy in particular, a couple of guys actually in particular in Oregon, and I would talk to them, and we would kind of go back and forth, feed each other information and compare notes and this kind of thing, because they kind of understood that I knew this as well, and their problem was they didn't speak any Spanish, a lot of them. And so it was that I did, and I would interview a lot of these. Most of the people I interviewed who are from this town, I interviewed in prison. They were all doing time in prison. These guys are very easy to arrest because they were retail traffic. They were retail vendors. You could arrest them all day long. You couldn't eradicate the system because they'd send more people up all the time. So this retail system kept on reconstituting itself, and that was what drove the cops really nuts, because they would do these big operations on these guys, and then they would be booking evidence, cell phones of the addicts, and the cell phones would start going off. Hey, we're back in business. It's new guys in town. Here's the new number. Blah blah, that kind of thing. It was really, but I would say too, after Dreamland came out, one of the most remarkable things, my wife and I were just certain that the book would fail. And because who wants to read about heroin, and that kind of thing. And because nobody wanted to talk about it. Politicians didn't pay much mind. Media really wasn't covering it in any kind of thorough way, I didn't think. And what happened was, after the book came out in April of 15, by September of 15, I began getting these invitations to come speak. And at first I was like, oh yeah, sure, that'd be great. Good. Okay. Go out to, small town in Indiana and go to a professional conference of public health nurses or public health faculty from universities or hospital administrators. Sometimes it'd be in Chicago or Vegas, or sometimes in DC, or maybe it'd be statewide. I went to several in upstate New York, and that kind of thing. And over the next several years, what began to happen, to our complete amazement, was that these invitations began to multiply. And I'm like, holy crap, man, this is insane. Because really, we were operating under the impression that nobody cared about addiction. Nobody cared about heroin, pill. That's what I encountered when I was writing the book. And then all of a sudden, so in the end, I ended up doing just an insane number of speeches. I think it was in beginning September of 15 to when the virus shut down everything, and last year I did 235 speeches. It just was unending, and there I was constantly being not accosted, but just people would ask me about my opinion about this or that, which to me is weird because I'm a reporter, man. I mean, just it. I try to be very humble about what I know and what I don't know. And I try very humble about telling people how they should approach this in their county in Indiana or in South Carolina, where I don't live, so, but anyway, that's kind of a little bit what happened there.
All right, does anybody else have any questions?
I want to go for a minute. Hey, Sam.
Hey, Art, how you doing?
I guess that's kind of my thing. How, I guess, and this isn't, I'm not trying to be on anything. I'm just trying to say, like, when you get yourself in a position where, I mean, it's kind of like when I watch an episode of 60 Minutes, and they state to me how we've been screwed by our government, or how we've been getting screwed by this certain agency, or how this company was fraudulently screwing America. Where do we take that, or what, where do you feel, and I guess you kind of answered it, you said that you're just a reporter, but how do you, after you have that power of having that voice, and then, you know, like, we're all, maybe this community that's here and we're all in Washington, and maybe we're looking to you saying, like, you know, what do we do? I mean, like,
well, I think I have to say it's a good question, but I have to say that for my way of thinking is this spread because of silence. Really, that's the main thing. You know, people say this only people began to pay attention to this once middle-class white people began to be affected, and there's some truth to that. However, I actually think of it a slightly different way, and I said this spread because it affected middle-class white people. And it spread because those middle-class white people didn't want anybody to know that their beautiful child, whose life they imagined when that boy or girl was born was going to be just this gorgeous, you know, wonderful idea, and all of a sudden is strung out, hooking on the streets, is you know, with a needle in his arm in a McDonald's bathroom toilet, and so they hid it. It was really, I think, everybody just kind of naturally, you know, lied, and it's a, you know, they were mortified. There's this stigma that goes along with this. It's this shame and all that kind of stuff. And so the obituaries didn't tell the truth when it came to cause of death, all that kind of. So I began to understand my role as there. You know, the journalist role is always, you know, the idea that sunshine is the best medicine. It's the physically as well as societally, you know. And so the more you bring it out, the more people can talk about it, the more people can ponder it, discuss it, people can think about, and then devise their own strategies locally. My big feeling is, though, that this has had most effect at the local level. And I might be wrong about that, but I certainly think I've traveled enough to see examples of it. I'm not sure if it's all across the country, but certainly in a lot of places I've been, where people have awakened and they've kind of understood my point, which is this happens. Does it happen because of pharmaceutical companies? Yes. Heroin traffickers? Yes. But it also happens because we're so atomized, man. You know, we're so isolated. And so what I began to see, the more I traveled, it was fascinating to watch. I began to see all these counties in which these groups just formed up. Nobody had a study to show the 10 things that they needed to do to fight this problem in our county. They say, forget that. We don't have time for that. We're just going to form up. And it was not just cops and sheriffs and probation and parole and all the rest. It was clergy, Kiwanis Club, the PTA, the Chamber of Commerce, college presidents, doctors, recovering addicts, et cetera. It's all these different people were now part of the mix. That was one of the most healthy, exhilarating things that I'd seen recently as an American. Honestly, it made me feel very proud to be of this country. And I felt that that's kind of where we kind of needed to go. The virus put a stop to that, but I'm thinking if this thing actually does ever lift, I think we need to go back there. And I think the virus will have taught us how important it is to be together, the importance of community.
Okay, so that, and definitely 100% I'm in agreement, and that's what we practice as a community. But if I were to make you, is this true or false? If 50 pounds of 500 pounds of heroin comes into Washington State, 500 pounds of heroin is going to get done.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So whatever we do as a community is nothing. It's just going to affect a different part of our community. But if they bring 500 pounds in, it ain't going to sit on the shelf. So my question would be, like, when somebody in government would read your book, would they drive to this place in Mexico and talk to these people?
Yeah. This is an excellent question, and it's some part of my next book, which you guys had a cover of you put up on the screen a little bit ago. My feeling is that what this also requires, there we go, the least of us. Yeah, there we go. What this also requires is an absolutely new relationship with Mexico, because we don't have a international drug problem. Okay, we have a Mexican drug problem, and truthfully, it's not just a Mexican drug problem; it's a Northwest Mexican drug problem. That's pretty much where we're talking. I mean, that's if you go down from Arizona along the Pacific coast, about a day you'll start hitting that region. You drive for another 2 days, that's the whole region. That's the area, and then of course the borderlands. These are also the problem. And so they have become extraordinarily adept at, forget heroin. That's the next book. Heroin is long gone. I mean, to me, it's fentanyl now. Fentanyl and methamphetamine, synthetic drugs. They don't need land anymore. They don't need farmers. They don't need pesticides. They just grow the stuff. I mean, they just make the stuff in a lab. The stuff comes in a port. There you go. Sinaloa is the last green state. Like if you go down the Sea of Cortez, down the Pacific coast, and you get that long little thin state, that's Sinaloa. Then the next one down is this real dinky thing. It's called Nayarit. And anyway, it continues. No, it's further over. It's further over. It's right over there. We go. Go down. Go down. Go down. That's Sinaloa right there. Okay. That's the Sinaloa cartel, Chapo Guzman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The huge influence on all the United States, that one little state right there, okay? Been there many times. It's a fascinating place and very, very disturbing too. My feeling is, Mexico, in the 1800s, the British forced an enormous supply of opium that their empire was growing in India on the country of China, creating really the horrible opium addiction that China later became famous for. Historians have treated with enormous criticism the British Empire for that thing. That's why we had the Opium Wars. That's how the British got Hong Kong for a lot of years, that kind of thing. It was an outrageous move on the part of the opium growers in the British Empire to find a market. And the way they find a market is they push it in a country that has made it illegal, but they do it anyway. This is because they can. To me, Mexico is that same thing here in our hemisphere. It's a country that has produced scandalous, just simply shameful amounts of drugs. Right, and those supplies. This next book is really going to be on this topic that you just mentioned, which is that this ends up being a supply story. We can talk about demand and supply the whole time, but really, it gets, the first thing starts with supply. Our supplies of, we didn't have this problem before the pharmaceutical companies and doctors began prescribing these opioids all across the country in huge amounts. And so I believe what we need is a dramatic new relationship with Mexico. Okay. We then also need to expand treatment options across the United States, but the treatment options, you're 100% right. As long as there's this scandalous quantities of fentanyl and methamphetamine coming in, treatment options are always going to be working very poorly, just because whenever you get out, it's like alcohol. The alcoholic is faced with about a dozen options to buy alcohol on every street he drives down, right? Well, it's not that different with methamphetamine right now, I have to say. And so we need to understand, and we need to make Mexico understand that this is not how a modern countries behave. We also have to understand, though, one very, very important thing, and that is that it is our guns purchased here and smuggled south that are allowing those cartels to the impunity that they have. We have these very, very lenient gun laws, in my opinion. You can buy guns and smuggle them south. I'm not sure how that's a Second Amendment issue. Maybe it is, but those cartels have all armed themselves. It's like we armed ISIS, about the same thing, if you ask me. All those cartels have armed themselves with guns and ammunition bought at Cabela's, bought at all these Dick's, sporting goods places, bought at gun shows where no one checks anything. That's where you can buy pistols up to 50 caliber rifles, and that's what is what has allowed these guys to have the impunity that they enjoy down in Mexico. And the price we pay for that, we pay a huge price. All of us pay a huge price for those guns. And those huge guns, that price is paid in the terms of the lowest, the methamphetamine that is more plentiful, potent, and cheaper than ever, fentanyl that's killing more people than ever. That is also, there's a two-edged sword when it comes to the issues related to Mexico. One is the scandalous amount of supply that they're allowing to be produced out of their country. The other is the scandalous amount of guns that we're allowing to arm those very people who are doing that.
So Sam, this is a two-part question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience, but this is very important to me from this perspective, in your opinion, because here's a smaller community. We can do everything we can, but my question to you would be, along the way of making this book, question A is, did you ever find evil intent? Did you ever actually see evil intent, or was there a lot of happenstance and circumstances? That's question A. And part B is, do you think it's possible that our federal government actually wants to have this trade with Mexico, and that it actually helps and benefits the people that are making money off it, and they don't care enough about our smaller communities to do anything about it?
I can tell you with regard to B, I have found no evidence of that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I have been doing this a long time. And I have to tell you, we have a system of drug enforcement that is working about as well as it can work. We don't have the example of a system not working and working about as poorly as you can work is in Mexico, where you have these enormous capos, these bosses like Chapo and his partner, Mayo Zambada, who nobody talks about, who is bigger than Chapo ever was, and many others. These guys grow to be large enough. Chapo was mentioned on the Forbes list of the world's 100 most wealthy people back in whenever it was, 2008 or something like that. I can't remember. Anyway, in our country, this is how the system's supposed to work, in my opinion. One is, they go after these guys. As soon as they get big enough, they get their heads lopped off. And then, of course, other people come up and they get there. And so the federal prison system, is filled. I mean, that's my gold mine. It's filled with people who have, a lot of them Mexicans, but also people who work with them from this country, who are got big and then got lopped off, and it's a constant process, just the way we're constantly investigating murder. People are still murdering people, even though we have homicide detectives. It doesn't stop. What really creates the problem is when you allow these people to become almost as big as the government in some areas, and that's what's happening in Mexico.
If this powder they were bringing across the border was anthrax, wouldn't it be stopped immediately?
I'm not sure that that's the case, honestly, because a lot of it is just, if there was a commercial economic motive to bring anthrax across, the answer to your first question is connected to this, Art. The answer, my feeling is, do I ever find evil intent? Not so often. What I find is commercial intent. People are making money. Money is a narcotic. It's just as big as heroin or sugar. Okay, it's an addictive thing, and people speak about it. Pardon me. Sorry. Hold on. There we go. People speak about it as if it's figuratively, like, I'm so addicted to money. It's true. I really do believe it. And it allows you to forget all the moral qualms you may have been taught with. Because remember, most of the trafficking in Mexico comes from small, conservative, traditional towns. Think of a town in Nebraska, right? That kind of town. Now, how is it that people from that, very Catholic, very traditional, very, well, how is it that those folks then turned it? Because they're poor and they make money, and all of a sudden they're not poor anymore. And what's more, I tell you, this gets into the theme of my second book. One of the most important things that they get, and you'd have to read my second book to understand this, because this is really important to understand about Mexican immigration. It's not poverty that brings people north so much as immigrants to work in landscaping or drywall hanging or sell drugs. It's the ability to not be humiliated anymore in Mexico for being poor anymore, to show the people who, part of being poor in Mexico is you don't have a lot of money, but that's everybody, right? Another part of being poor is you're humiliated for not being wealthier, or by people who do have a little bit more money. And this is a very, very big part of it. And so that is a narcotic too. When you can walk around the streets, as those guys did in my book, I described this kind of almost convention of heroin traffickers every August when they have their annual fiesta. These guys walking around, hiring bands to play for them and their girlfriend as they, these guys dancing with a big ring of a 6-pack of beer on his finger as he's dancing with his girlfriend. All these guys at parties boasting, showing everybody how much money that is a narcotic too. That is a huge narcotic. And so do I think this is, yeah, right, Levi's buying all these, that's part of the book as well. If you've read the book, there's people, they used to get addicts to trade Levi's 501s for hits of heroin, for little balloons of heroin. Why? Because back in Mexico during the 90s in particular, and into the 2000s, it's changed now, but back when I was first down there, I knew this for a fact, that the Levi's 501s were the gold standard, particularly really blue, not washed out, not faded, not ripped, blue, dark blue Levi's 501s. And you walk around town, the plaza on Friday, Saturday night, in these little towns with Levi's 501s, and everyone's like, whoa, man, that is the coolest. And so Levi's 501s were like a barter system that they had. They would barter dope but that's part of it. What they wanted to do was show themselves to have arrived. They're no longer the sandal wearing poor kid whose mom has to ask for credit from the butcher and the baker. That changes all of that. And therefore, what you get is people for whom the moral compass is kind of, the dial is shifted or something like that. I'm not quite sure it's an evil intent as much as it is, I'm getting out of here and this is the method through which I can do it. That's the best I got.
Let's open it up, Ange or Jeff, and see if we can see any hands. Anyone want to ask Sam a question?
Yeah, so let's open it up, guys. And that means any questions out there from anybody, we welcome them. Any question is great. All you do is just use your raise your hand feature on your device, and then you get in line. I did get a text question that I'll grab in just a moment. Let me get all this set up here correctly. And if you cannot figure out the raise your hand feature on how to do that, you can just wave your arms and get my attention. Now, there are quite a few screens, so I can't see everybody at once. So just be patient and hang tight. We do want to get to you. So let me grab my this question that came in via text. So let's see, where did Sam go? There's Sam. I'm going to put Sam on spotlight. Okay, so the question was, what can parents, we little people, do to impact this problem? This is a huge, complex problem with multiple industries contributing. Is the key getting to the source of the pain, like how art encourages the basement crew to be in the moment?
Yeah, I do believe there is something about this story that is connected to our methods of parenting over the last 20, let's just say 20 years or so or more. One is that we refuse to have our children go through any, well, if we think of it as pain, right? So just one example, you get your wisdom teeth out and you get your wisdom teeth out. I got my wisdom teeth out, each visit for 2 visits back when I first got my health insurance. I had a job that had health insurance. I'm pretty sure I was given like ibuprofen or Tylenol or something like that. This was a lot of years ago. But now the idea is, no, my son or daughter, precious son or daughter, cannot feel pain. So the dentists are given huge bottles of Vicodin. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy. And I can tell you, I've talked to at least 12 people on the road whose kids have died from a heroin overdose. Their addiction started with addiction that began, the pills that were given to them after that. But it gets down to more than that. It's like we are afraid to have our children strive, work hard, postpone gratification, and suffer to achieve something. So we're always saying, oh, you did such a great job, when they did nothing. They really did not very much at all, right? No. And work hard and get a job and make money, and instead it's like this horrible feeling of failure when your daughter is the only 8th grader without a $1,200 phone. That's insane. That's an insane situation to be in, right? It's just absolutely insane. There is a friend of my wife said there's this very important vitamin that we need to give kids. It's called vitamin no. You can't have this. You got to work hard. You got to do that. You're not perfect. Work harder. You want to get better in your sports team? Well, run on the weekends. How about that? And this is a real struggle because all around our kids are kids who have huge amounts of money and are doting parents and the helicopter thing, that kind of thing. To my way of thinking, a big part of parenting now needs to I think that's what the opioid epidemic was teaching us. It was teaching us a lot of different things. One of them was it's okay for kids to feel, in some cases it's not pain, it's disappointment. Disappointment that you don't have an iPhone in 7th grade. Yeah, okay. So you're disappointed. Get with it. Get over it. Toughen up. Yeah. Literally, to me, that's how it feels. Like, it feels like this entire, we as parents have become these utter wimps. And I'll count myself in it. We've had this battle with my daughter for a long time. Believe me, it's not over either. And the idea is let's toughen up. We can't bear to think we're the only parent whose kid doesn't have X or Y or Z, or who doesn't get driven to school. For God's sakes, fucking walk, man. I mean, seriously, just walk, ride your bike, right? It's that feeling of always needing to take care of every problem. Pain, we have pain for a reason, and it's a good thing. Now, as I said, life-mangling pain is not. And we need to understand that life-mangling pain is a very serious thing. We should not dismiss it, and we need to treat it. It needs to be very seriously treated. However, I'm not talking about that kind of pain. I'm talking about the kind of stuff, the grit of the friction of life. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff is really, really important for kids to experience, to go without, to feel a little bit of, postponed gratification, that kind of thing. And so I do believe that a lot of the problems grow out of this inability to handle adversity that has been bred into children today, frankly. And also, I have to say, frankly, the idea that kids just spend so much time alone, on screens. Being on screens, all the boys now in my daughter's class, most of them don't do sports. They're just doing video games. I'm like, man, that's a goddamn sickness, man. And I'm glad I don't have a boy, because I mean, I played basketball in high school. I played football, basketball, baseball, all the way through my youth, and I rode bikes and all that kind of stuff. And it was this great, that's why if you ask me, boys in particular, I'll just speak because I was one. Boys are like dogs, right? They got to be running every single day, all the time. They need to run and run and run. And that's what, again, this story became about a bit more than just heroin and drug and pain pills, it became all these things were I began to see all these connections to this story, right? That the parenting and the isolation and all the screens and unwillingness to do anything to work on our own wellness, our own. Now I'm and during the middle of all this, I began to understand that this was the case. And so I began to, first thing I did was I stopped eating refined sugar. So I just stopped with the Pepsi, Coke. I used to drink Coke all the time, and M&Ms and Snickers bars and that kind of stuff, cookies. That's what I would eat on the road a lot, stopped with all that crap. That's like heroin, basically. I mean, and there's a good reason for saying that. Let me just tell you one last thing. You can take another question. But, the University of Princeton University back in 2003 was doing, trying to understand the addictive properties of food and particularly sugar. And they began to realize that it behaved very much like heroin. And so one day, the director of the lab there said, let's do a study on sugar-dependent rats. They had these cages of sugar-dependent rats and non-dependent rats. So let's do a study with both cages, and we'll give the rats naloxone. We'll give them Narcan, right? Everybody there, I'm sure, knows what Narcan is. It's the thing that revives you out of if you don't, it's something that revives you out of an opioid overdose. And it sends you pretty quickly into withdrawals, okay? So they did. And all these rats were dependent on sugar. Now they give them naloxone. All these rats go into withdrawals, just like they were heroin addicts, but they're on sugar. And so what it means is that sugar hits the same receptors in our brain that heroin does. And so I began to realize we need to, this epidemic is calling on us to look at our diets, what we consume, how much exercise we get, that kind of thing. I'm walking 4 miles a day now. Feels very good. Before the epidemic, I was swimming a lot too. Now I can't do that, but anyway, I can walk. So.
Wow.
Anyway, that's why I say that this is something that's about much bigger than the original story that I thought it fit into. You know what I mean? When I started.
Yeah, I actually wrote down a quote from a video I watched on YouTube that I put a star behind. And the quote from you, Sam, was, "It started as a crime story and ended up an American story."
Right.
And I really liked that. That stood out for me. Carrie and Doug Burrows has a question. Let me get them unmuted. And hi, Carrie.
Hi there. Hi, Sam. Thank you so much.
Hey, so thank you.
So today, being the group of parents with addicts and working hard as the community that they've created, what can we do today to help the future of our community, the country? Do we start writing letters to our congressman? Do we hit Olympia? Do I start twittering the shit out of people?
I mean, I think a few things. First of all, I think this began to change when parents like you began to start telling their stories. Really serious about that. When I was in Ohio. One place I spent a lot of time for my book was in Ohio. Now, you probably know Ohio has been one of the most massively hit states of this problem of any of the West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Tennessee, those states. But Ohio is really one or two always. And when I was doing my book, I found only 5 parents in Ohio. 5 parents in the thousands of parents affected by this, only 5 wanted to talk publicly about their story. I would use every option and every avenue that you can find to tell your story, so you can normalize the idea that addiction is part of life. It's part of how our brains are built. One of the reasons I said that my next book is called The Least of Us is because we all have the least of us is within us all, right? We look at that addict eating from the trash and we think, what a disgusting species of human being. No, we are all that addict with just a little bit of difference in our lives. We would be there too. We have the brain structure, all of us. Neuroscience is now telling us this very clearly in many, many, many ways, that we all have the brain structure for addiction. And so it's very important for parents like you to be telling your stories constantly. And I mean, at the drop of a hat. Okay. That may not feel like you're doing much, but I do believe that is where you are most powerful. And also when it comes to city council meetings, when it comes to church, when it comes to, I don't even know, Kiwanis meetings or Friday night football games or whatever venue you find yourself in, trying to find places where you can tell your story is very, very important. I also do believe in I think one of the big things that got us into this is that we all retreated indoors. We were all isolated. Addiction's about isolation. The addict just spends time with his dope and that's it, right? Well, we were already in it. That described America long before the doctors began prescribing this. But we're all kind of in our own little cocoons, in our own little houses and screens and so on. And I do believe in getting out, and the process of being part of a neighborhood. You just do it neighborhood, but you can't change the world. You can be part of the change on your street or in your little neighborhood, whatever that is. And I do believe that when I was writing Dreamland, this is just another kind of aside. When I was writing Dreamland, I began to understand that this all was part of the story. And I looked at my street, which is a nice middle-class street. It's basically just straight middle class. And I realized nobody's outside. My daughter has nobody to play with. Nobody's out there, saying hello and all that. So we did something about it. It used to be that people got out of their houses organically. It happened all the time when I was growing up. That doesn't happen anymore. So you now have to plan it. You have to be part of the conscious decision to change that. So we began doing this weird thing, which you can feel free to rip off. I don't care. It's called Street of Heads. All right. Now, my daughter at the time was like 7 or something like that. Okay. So Street of Heads. And that was just before Halloween. And we get all the kids, we invite all the kids from all over the neighborhood and surrounding streets and all that stuff to come by this one little cul-de-sac near our house. And we get these styrofoam wig heads, and all the kids come out and they decorate the styrofoam wig heads with all paint and arrows through the thing and all these big eyeballs and everything. And it's just bizarre. These wig heads became these bizarre kind of canvas. Every kid and not all the parents got into it too. And we put these heads on stakes up along the street, open air, art gallery. And it was this magnificent thing that everybody was like high afterwards. I mean, and why? Because everybody wants to do that. Everybody wants to, they don't know how. So you have to plan that. And I want you to know that we're now in last year was year 7. With the virus, we even pulled it off. We're now in year 7 of Street of Heads. And the neighborhood is transformed. Okay? The neighborhood is transformed. It's a beautiful thing to watch. All the time, kids are now, a lot of the kids now, my daughter's in 9th grade. Now a lot of the kids are younger, they've moved in, but you see all these kids up and down the street outside, hanging out, being part of it. We're aware of everything that goes on. Anybody tries to sell dope to our kids, we're on top of, I believe we'd be very much on top of it. And so to me, that is really, I think, part of the solution. It's low-tech stuff. It's block parties, cookouts, showing a movie on a front lawn. We've done that too, several times, 3 or 4 times, I think at least. And just hanging out and being a part of a neighborhood. That is what we had stripped from us over easily the last 30 years. It is a damaging, horribly damaging thing. And the symptom of that is the opioid epidemic. And the one way you fight those pernicious traffickers who are coming up with all kinds of diabolical shit that they want to sell to people is strong neighborhoods. That is a huge bulwark against that stuff. And so you're asking me what as parents you can do? Yeah, I would try to find out if what what kinds of things the town needs, and write to Olympia about that, and write to your mayor about that, and so on. But I also think that you have this enormous, and I see a lot of younger folks here too. Man, do stuff outside. Get out of the goddamned house, right? Be outside among other Americans, for goodness sake. Put the goddamn phones down. Get outside, play football outside. Go hang out outside. Be with other people. And that is, I just, I began to think of it. This one person asked me one time, how do we recreate community in America? And I'm like, holy shit, I'm a reporter. I don't have a clue. But then when I thought about it, I thought, well, actually, what did we used to do? We used to be outside. So I think that it's like these simple things, simple, small steps. Don't think you need to change the world. Don't need you just be outside. Be with others, do that kind of stuff.
So we have a couple of people lining up here, and we're getting down to our last 10 minutes here, and now everybody's questions are coming on. Thank you, Carrie, for that. Love the response. Joni K, now we lost your camera. Are you still there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you. I could see you a minute ago. Let's see. You're from Florida?
There, can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We just can't see you.
Florida, and I'm actually keep my camera off because I get Zoom work better off, and when the camera's off, I'm actually in a motel in Taos. I just really, number one, can you hear me? Everybody,
yes.
And I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Sam, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank you because I'm one of the mothers. I celebrated 28 already on Saturday. Actually was prescribed narcotics unbeknownst to me while he was in college, he and his girlfriend, and he became a junkie.
I'm sorry.
Years clean, and the two of us have actually gone on speaking engagements together. I've been really complacent during the pandemic, and I couldn't wait to just see it. I saw you address the Senate. I think one time you were on the floor of the Senate, and I just, I'm like your groupie. I want you to know that, and I want you to know that you've really made it, and that I have also done ground rounds to doctors. I'm a physician assistant. I went back to school and became a PA, and I've argued with more doctor medication, because the multifaceted problem that we, is a great, yes, I totally agree that we have to stop doctors from.
We don't have, hey, Joni, we don't have
going to become addicts.
Next question, Anskis.
Yeah. We don't have.
Right. Anyway, thank you, Sam. I love you. Goodbye. Okay.
Thank you, Joni. Thank you, sweetie. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks. I've done several grand rounds at different hospitals in Cincinnati, the Bronx, New York. I think in Washington, Seattle as well. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, and we have Grace. We have not met Grace either. We've got all these new people we have not met, but Grace Lebrano has a question.
Hi.
Oh, sorry, you got muted. There you go.
Hi, Sam. Hi, hello. It's more of a statement to agree with Sam. Kids can be like dogs, and dogs have a purpose, and when you just cage them all day, they become self-destructive. And I'm from Federal Way, where SCORE, King County program, is sending a van down here with needles. Instead of having constructive things or program that kids can do something, they're offering needles to children and anyone who wants them. Of course, there is no age restriction. And I think kids need something to do, or else they're going to find things to do. And then they have these, liberal programs where I feel encourage people to do drugs and support that habit by giving out needles. And it's no exchange either. They're just giving them out here in Federal Way in public places. It's terrible. So I just want to agree that there should be something done with the children, some kind of drug education class in school, starting in junior high school. Common sense things for them to do instead of, just falling into this habit of having nothing to do and then searching. And when they search, they're going to find things that aren't good for them and develop bad habits instead of good habits. Like doing the sports, getting out, getting involved in things, social interactions, instead of self-isolating, like Sam mentioned.
Yeah,
Grace.
I think that's a good point. I was once a reporter. Before I moved to Mexico, I was once a reporter for the Tacoma News Tribune, and I covered Federal Way. That was one of the towns that I covered for a bit. It's been quite a long time now. It's like another lifetime ago, but yeah.
All right. Thank you, Grace. So we are down. We would have time for one more question if there's anybody out there, any of our families. And I just want to make a comment that, Sam, I really loved what you shared about normalizing pain for our kids. Besides art, I've never heard that spoken. And so I thought that really remarkable. And it's so true. So very true.
Well, I think it's really a big part of what's going on here. If you ask me, it's just like people not being in pain.
Sam, we work on a kind of a premise, and there's this like kind of fallacy in the drug addiction world that like addiction creates codependency, and I truly believe it's the other way around. I believe codependency creates addiction, and I believe that we start taking people's pain away long before the drugs do. And
yeah, it's one of those things that dawned on me in the middle of my research. I would not have been able to tell you that when I started writing the book and all, but along the way, the more, this is the beauty of journalism. This is why I love it. It's like the ocean current. You talk to enough people, you leave your mind wide open for different facts and different perspectives. And it's like the ocean current. It'll just take you someplace you never, ever thought you'd go. And it's kind of like that a conclusion is where I was led to, I believe. I think there's another question by somebody. Deanna.
Yeah, there is one more. We've got Deanna here. Hi, Deanna.
Hello. Hey, Sam.
Hello.
I have one question about your experience when you've traveled around, where you saw a community that was really making strides kind of in a multi-pronged approach, from the parents to the politics to the local government. Was there anywhere that made an impression on you that was having some success?
Here's what I've been asked that before, and one way of answering that is to say, I mentioned earlier that these counties that I'd go to, small counties, not a lot of resources, they would already, by the time I got there, they would almost always have a community task force or whatever they called it. It really was a forum of bringing people together. And again, as I said, it was not just law enforcement. It was a wide variety of people, all of whom had come together, learned each other's cell phones, names, which is strange. I thought, geez, this county is so quiet, so small. You don't know each other? And then, well, no, we're all like this. We're all like isolated, Now it was like more like this. And so I began to see that process working. And they stumbled. They was not perfect. That's the beauty of it, We wanted perfection. We wanted a one-size-fits-all solution to a very complicated issue, which is the human pain. Has to do with the brain. It's very, very complex. And we said for a good number of years in this culture, in our culture, we said one pill for all kinds of human pain. Nonsense, complete nonsense, but we believed it and we did it and we end up. So now they're saying, okay, we're going to try a whole bunch of different things. Some of it won't work. Okay, who cares? Fine. People fail. Ted Williams, the greatest hitter in the world, failed 2/3 of the times he stepped up to the plate. He went to the Hall of Fame, Don't worry about it. You fail. Okay, it's okay. Just keep going. Keep going. It's like addiction. You relapse. Okay, so what? That's part of the issue. Just keep going. And so they've done that. But I will say this, my next book, the last chapter is about the town where I based a lot of Dreamland. The town is Portsmouth, Ohio. It's on the Ohio River, southern Ohio, right across from Kentucky. And that's where the Dreamland pool was that they destroyed or had dug up, and then the town fell into this horrible addiction problem. The last chapter of my next book is about how they are kind of coming back. Now, there's a complicated story because that doesn't mean that there are no drugs in Portsmouth, for goodness sake. In fact, there's like two competing narratives. Let's get high all the time, and let's find something more interesting than these boring ass drugs to do. Let's move forward in life. That's the other narrative now. It's become a place started by micro entrepreneurs, right? People who are starting these dinky little businesses. Again, they're not saving the world. They're just starting a business and employ 3 people, right? But you get enough of those, you build a critical mass, you build a buzz, right? Okay, everyone's like this vibe. Everyone's like, yeah, CrossFit working out has become huge in that town. Everyone's tired of being fat, smoking, eating sugar and pizza all day long. They're doing that. So you develop this community. I'm very into understanding scenes and artistic scenes, music scenes that don't really exist as much as they used to, I don't think. But I was very into punk rock when I was in high school and college. And there was a punk rock scene where everybody was into it, this kind of thing. And you had places to meet and places to go, and you all did it yourself. It was all do it yourself. That's what's happening there. It's like a bunch of people, and it's growing every day, have understood we're tired of this narrative about our town and where it's so dangerous to raise kids, and there's all these drugs everywhere. And we want to find a new story to tell. And so you see these micro entrepreneurs, you see these guys stepping in to rehab these 100-year-old brick buildings that thankfully the town never knocked down. They're beautiful. They just have been shells for 50 years. And now they're apartments, and now there's a restaurant, and now there's people come to the restaurant. And all of a sudden that vibe that everybody has been yearning for is now working slowly. It's again, and stumbling and all that. That's the whole point. That it's not perfect. It is not perfect. It's like nobody is born perfect, and every addict has to understand that too, and comes to understand that. Just like an addict, Portsmouth is like coming on back, And to me, that's the last chapter in the next book. It was the last 30 pages of Dreamland, but that back then it was like this glimmer of recovery that I thought I spotted. So I figured 6 years later, 5 years later, really, I'm going to go back and see what that glimmer turned into. And sure enough, again, it's not to say there's no dope in Portsmouth. There's a lot of methamphetamine. That's a whole other thing we haven't talked about tonight, but it's a whole other topic, really. But and that's what also the next book's about. But it's to say these folks, it's not perfect, but people are moving forward, and they're feeding on each other's energies. You know what I mean? And that's a beautiful, exhilarating, wonderful American thing to watch. That's a beautiful story to watch happen. There's nobody with a blueprint of how this is supposed to work. Nobody. What they have relied on is community connection and feeding off each other's vibe, and everybody getting together to paint the curbs and sidewalks and fire hydrants in downtown Portsmouth. All together, that kind of thing. It's small stuff. And that's where you find community resilience and rebuilding. To me, it's a beautiful, beautiful American story, man. When I tell it, sometimes I get tears in my eyes. I'm not kidding. It is a beautiful thing. So to me, that's where I would say this goes. And it was just like I was telling the parents earlier, it's all about small stuff. It's all about getting out, being around other people, feeling the vibe from other folks, being part of the enthusiasm instead of the downer crap that dope brings.
So community, you would say, is like the final, I guess, the weapon that finally competes with the drug.
I don't know anything else to tell you, seriously. And that doesn't mean that it's perfect. Again, we have this idea that if something doesn't work, perfectly, that it must not be worth trying, or why do we fund that, or that kind of thing. BS. That's total BS. It's you try it. As I said, Ted Williams failed 2/3 of the times he stepped to the plate. For goodness sake, greatest hitter in history of Major League Baseball. Don't worry about failure. Failure is part of human life. We got into this idea that somehow, particularly when it comes to tax money, nothing should be tried unless it works perfectly. And if it doesn't work perfectly, then we should defund it or whatever. And I think that's just nonsense. That's totally unrealistic. It's that same unrealism that comes along with the idea of saying, I have a pill, and that pill will solve your pain and your pain over there and all you people, everybody's pain. That's nonsense. It's a delusional fantasy that we were living in. And we need to get back to the idea, first of all, that we all have accountability for our own health. And that's physical health, working out, walking, drinking water, leaving the sugar out of the mix, all that kind of stuff. But it's also neighborhood health. It's also town health, right? And being out and being a part of this is really so. I mean, that is overwhelmingly the conclusion that I am left with. Okay, and I don't have more to give, but I don't think there is more to give. I think that is it. And is it easy? No. Does it fail? Yeah, sometimes, but who cares? You just keep doing it and finding those people who have the energy and on whom you can feed off of, and they can feed off you. And then you develop these little cells of resistance. It's very much like the French resistance fighters against the Nazis in occupied France. They find these little cells and they go out and kill lots of Nazis. It's good. It's really good. That's kind of they're forming these little communities in an area where everyone's kind of like, bought off or scared or whatever. I think that's kind of where we go with this.
I think this is a beautiful note to start closing on. I want to say how fitting. Art, I'll let you speak here. Let me get you back on the screen. I think it's very fitting how he talks about rebuilding the community, and the basement crew there is coming at you from Rebuild Recovery there in the basement. So I think it's very fitting, Sam, that you talk about rebuilding, because here we are with Rebuild Recovery. So I will let Jeff and Art take it now with their closing thoughts, and we'll wrap up.
Bobby has a question.
Oh, Bobby has a question. Great. Bobby from Rebuild Recovery.
I just had a question with you being in the media. How important is it now that we have established that there's a problem? How important is it to bring that there's a solution? And that is bringing the community back together, and it starts here. And then how important is it to bringing that into the media? How important is it to broadcast it and have something that, hey, something needs to be done? And how do we go about doing that?
Well, I think as probably first step is to start doing it. Okay, not to worry about how much it gets covered in the media. The media is a very weird place now, mainly because I would say it's so many budgets at so many newspapers and radio stations and TV stations have been cut, and there's fewer reporters and all that kind of stuff. I would work on doing it yourself. I was very into, as I said, I was very into punk rock when I was a kid in high school and college, and punk rock, I loved it. This is like the Ramones and the Clash and all these great bands. I was very into that, but the thing, and I still listen to that music all the time, but the thing that was greatest about punk rock, there were a lot of problems with punk rock. A lot of people got, consumed by dope in punk rock, and that was the negative. But the positive of it was to say, you don't have to wait around for some higher authority to give you permission to do something. You could get up there and play. You can't play very well. Who cares? Get up there and play. Doesn't matter. It burns away all the cruddy, the hierarchies and all that kind of stuff. And it says to a young person, and I thought that was very healthy for me to hear when I was 20. Don't wait for permission. Just do it. Long before Nike co-opted that beautiful idea as a corporate logo, punk rock was saying that. They were saying, just go do it. Don't wait. Don't say someday I'll do it. Yeah, that's dope talking. Someday I'll get off the couch and stop doing, smoking weed and shooting up. No, go do it. Go out there, and if you can imagine it, go do it. Don't wait for people. And my entire career almost has been based on that idea. It's been, screw it, I'm just gonna go do this stuff, and I'm not gonna wait for people to say, I don't think you can, or maybe you shouldn't try that, Not to say you should never listen to guidance, but there are moments when you just need to follow your own thing and try to do it. And then if you fail, well, you failed, so what? You tried it, And so I just think, find ways in which you are helping the community improve. It can become, when I'm on my walks, I look for trash to pick up. Why not? Why should I not? Pick up trash on the way out, hang out, go do cookouts, do whatever. You think them up. You use your creativity, Bobby, that you have and your buddies have to find stuff to do and make, and don't worry if it's really small. It doesn't matter. Just keep on doing it. And then eventually, that's not the first step is not to go to the media. First step is you to do it and all your buddies to do it and all you guys to do it. Then after that, then you worry about whether or not other people are doing it. Because don't be afraid that because it's a small scale thing that you're not saving the world. Don't worry if you're not saving the world. You're not going to save the world. That's okay. Just get out and do it. Be part of something original, creative, and not sit around and go, well, someday I'll do it.
Jeff, do you have something to say first? And then I want to close with Sam. I got something I got to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Sam, for your time tonight. I was
My
really
pleasure.
looking forward to this. If you haven't read Sam's book, please check it out. He's got a second one coming out. And hopefully we can have you back in, say, next 6 months to a year, and you can share the story there. So thank you so much, Art, Governor.
My pleasure, Jeff. Thank you.
Sam, I got to say something because you said throughout this thing that you're not a reporter. And, I've heard reporters and I've listened to the media, and anything that has ever pertained to addiction, I liken myself a leader, and I like to do my own thing, and I like to be creative. And anything that being said, anything I've ever seen in the media that says addiction, I turn it off immediately. I will not. I don't read books on addiction. I don't listen to what they say about addiction. But you said to me that you're not just a reporter. And that's just not true, because I find you to be a leader, and a very valuable leader. And I don't say this very much, but in the world of addiction, I help addicts and families every day. But your book helped a lot of people, and it helped do what you said. I really think it's an honor that you've been on our show, and that honor we don't give to many people. We don't go out and just try to get anyone. We try to get you because of the value that you provide. Because what you're saying is spot on. We believe in it, and we will follow it. And we look to you for leadership, and we look to you to be our voice too. So thank you for being here. And I truly mean that. You're not just a reporter, you're a leader, and you're making a difference in America. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Art. This has been great. I love, one of the real revelations of my life has been to be able to meet and talk virtually or in person with people all over the country involved in this. It's an absolute jewel of an experience to be able to do. And I've been doing it now for several years, and I don't get tired of it ever. And so I really want to say thank you all very much. Keep struggling, keep pushing on, keep doing stuff and not asking permission. And that's the way things move forward. And think of your town, your street, your cul-de-sac, whatever, and how to improve that. And I think that's the way we work this way out as Americans. So anyway, thank you very, very much. Happy to be on another 6 months to a year after I'm done with the next book, after the book comes out. But for now, thank you all very, very much. It's really sweet of you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. All right. Great night, everybody. Good night, good night, good night. This recording will be posted on our YouTube channel. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.
That was really good.